In 1966, the United States Army constructed one of its largest bases in Vietnam. Thousands of soldiers, helicopters, artillery, tanks, a fortified perimeter ringed with watchtowers and floodlights, 30 kilometers northwest of Saigon, Cu Chi Base Camp. By every military standard, an impenetrable fortress. They built it directly on top of 250 kilometers of enemy tunnels, and they had absolutely no idea. Every single night, soldiers inside the perimeter were dying. Same pattern, every time. Darkness falls. Somewhere behind the barracks, an explosion, automatic fire, screaming. Soldiers rush to the location. Nothing. No retreating figures, no trails, no bodies, just dead Americans and silence. Every morning, the identical report on the commander's desk. Attacked last night, enemy vanished, no contact made. For months, patrols sweep the surrounding jungle, daily, full sweeps. They find nothing. No camps, no supply lines, no positions, no indication that anyone had ever been there. It was like fighting something that did not physically exist. And then one patrol spots a hole, small, hidden beneath leaves, just beyond the perimeter wire. An engineer drops to his knees and shines a flashlight inside. The tunnel drops down, turns a corner, and disappears into absolute darkness. He stands up. "Sir, I think we found the problem." What nobody realizes yet is that beneath this base, beneath the mess hall, beneath the barracks, beneath the helicopter pads, there are 250 kilometers of hand-dug tunnels. And over the next 9 years, those tunnels will kill more Americans than any single engagement in the entire Vietnam War. How does an army with no heavy machinery, no industrial equipment, no material resources build an underground city directly beneath the most powerful military force on the planet without a single person noticing? That is exactly what we are going to find out. The Cu Chi tunnels did not start as a weapon. They started as a way to not die. In the 1940s, during the French colonial war, Vietnamese villagers began digging shallow shelters to escape aerial bombardment. Simple holes in the ground, basic covers, primitive burrows. By the time the Americans arrived 2 decades later, those shelters had been growing and expanding for 20 years, and everything came down to the soil, red laterite clay. Hard as poured concrete when dry, it does not collapse under pressure, does not wash away in rain, does not crumble when explosions detonate nearby. The Vietnamese did not choose Cu Chi by accident. They chose it because the earth itself was a construction material, stronger and more reliable than anything they could have manufactured with tools. And the tools were as basic as it gets: short-handled hoes, wicker baskets, bare human hands, nothing else. Every single entrance was camouflaged. Trap doors buried under leaves, grass, or termite mounds. Some entrances were submerged beneath ponds. To find them, you had to dive underwater and feel along the muddy bottom until your fingers found the opening. The entrances were deliberately sized, 60 centimeters across, just wide enough for a slim Vietnamese person to squeeze through on their stomach, and just narrow enough to guarantee that no American soldier wearing combat gear could follow without getting stuck. By the early 1960s, the basic tunnel network was already in place, but the Viet Cong understood instantly what they were up against: the most powerful military force in the history of human civilization. Overwhelming firepower from land, sea, and air. Complete and total air supremacy. Resources that seemed infinite. Fighting them on the surface was not combat. It was a death sentence, so they went below the surface. And they expanded the tunnels with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Deeper, longer, new branches in every direction. Connected villages, connected supply routes, connected command posts. Everything linked to everything else. 3 distinct levels. The first, 3 meters below the surface. Shallow enough for rapid access, deep enough to survive standard artillery bombardment. The second, 6 meters down, significantly safer during heavier shelling. The third, 9 meters below ground, engineered specifically to withstand direct hits from the largest conventional bombs in the entire American arsenal. Each level was connected to the others by vertical shafts fitted with sealed hatches. If the Americans flooded the top level, the Viet Cong descended to the second. If they pumped gas into the second, they moved down to the third. The system had a built-in response to every attack anyone above ground could devise. But the tunnels were far more than escape routes. They were a city, a fully functioning underground civilization. Hospitals with operating tables where surgeons performed procedures on wounded fighters by the light of candles and oil lamps. Kitchens equipped with ventilation systems so ingeniously designed that cooking smoke was channeled horizontally through hundreds of meters of tunnel before seeping out of the ground at a point located far from any entrance, making detection from the air physically impossible. Weapons workshops where captured American ammunition was carefully dismantled and recycled into new armaments. Printing presses that produced propaganda leaflets by the thousands. Wells that provided clean drinking water. Sleeping quarters where thousands of human beings lived for months at a stretch without ever seeing daylight. At its peak, up to 10,000 people lived underground at Cu Chi simultaneously. Children were born down there. Couples were married. People lived entire chapters of their lives and then died, all of it happening 9 meters below the boots of American soldiers who walked above them every single day, completely unaware that an entire world existed beneath their feet. The United States Army threw everything it had at the Cu Chi tunnels. Every weapon, every technology, every idea. Bombs, poison gas, fire, floodwater, trained dogs. Nothing worked. And every single failed attempt taught the Viet Cong precisely how to survive whatever came next. First attempt, the obvious one, bombing. If the tunnels are underground, hit them from above hard enough and they collapse. Simple physics. In 1965, Operation Rolling Thunder began. B-52 strategic bombers dropped thousands of tons of high explosives across the Cu Chi district. When the bombing runs ended, the surface of the earth was unrecognizable. Trees had been vaporized, craters pocked the landscape in every direction. Jungle had been reduced to gray ash. The Americans examined the aerial photographs and saw a picture of absolute annihilation. What they could not see was what existed 9 meters below. The deepest level of the tunnel system was completely, entirely untouched. The Viet Cong had simply descended to the lowest level during the raids, waited in the dark until the rumbling stopped, and then climbed back up. The bomb craters that scarred the landscape turned out to be genuinely useful. They collected rainwater during the monsoon season. They provided natural cover and concealment. The bombing campaign that had been designed to obliterate the tunnels had accidentally improved the terrain surrounding them. Second attempt. Agent Orange. A chemical defoliant sprayed from low-flying aircraft across entire regions. It kills every leaf on every tree, destroys crops, strips away the thick jungle canopy that provides concealment. Without vegetation, the Viet Cong would have nowhere to hide above ground. No cover, no concealment. Entire forests died within days of a single pass. The landscape turned brown, barren, lifeless, like the surface of another planet, and the tunnels underneath were completely and entirely unaffected. You can kill every tree standing above a tunnel. The tunnel does not notice. The Viet Cong stayed underground during spraying operations, waited for the chemicals to settle, and then emerged into a dead landscape that was actually easier to traverse at night because there was no longer any undergrowth to slow their movement or make noise underfoot. Third attempt, flooding. Military engineers pumped water directly into every tunnel opening they could locate. Water fills the passages, forces everyone out into the open, or drowns them where they hide. Straightforward, brutal, effective in theory, except the Viet Cong had planned for this years in advance. Between every major section of tunnel, they had installed watertight hatches, sealed doors that could be slammed shut in seconds. When water entered one section, the adjacent hatches were closed immediately. The flooded section was sacrificed, written off. The rest of the network remained bone dry and fully operational. American engineers pumped thousands upon thousands of gallons of water into Cu Chi. They flooded approximately 2% of the total system. The other 98% continued to function as though nothing whatsoever had happened. Fourth attempt, poison gas. Pump it into the tunnel entrances. The gas spreads through the entire network. Everyone inside either dies or is forced to the surface. In theory. In practice, the tunnels were far too long, far too complex, and far too branching for gas to travel effectively through the system. It dispersed, lost concentration, weakened with every turn and branch point. By the time remnants reached the deeper sections, the gas was barely potent enough to cause mild eye irritation. The Viet Cong had also installed ventilation baffles at strategic points throughout the system. Simple wooden panels that could be sealed shut to completely block airflow between sections. Gas entered one zone. The zone was sealed. The gas dissipated into nothing. The engineers pumping it in at the surface had absolutely no way of knowing whether it was having any effect because nothing ever emerged from the other end of the system. Fifth attempt. Dogs. Specially trained German shepherds working with experienced military handlers. The dogs locate tunnel entrances by scent, mark them for demolition. It was a sound idea. For about 2 weeks. The Viet Cong learned about the dog program almost immediately. They began rubbing American brand soap and crushed hot pepper around every tunnel entrance. The soap masked the human scent beneath a smell that the dogs had been trained to associate with friendly American forces. The pepper destroyed their olfactory capability for hours at a time. Handlers stood and watched helplessly as their meticulously trained dogs walked directly over concealed tunnel entrances without displaying the faintest reaction. The dog program was quietly and permanently discontinued. Every single method that the most technologically advanced military force on the face of the planet could conceive of had been defeated by people armed with hand shovels, wooden panels, a bar of soap, and ground pepper. 5 attempts, 5 failures. And each failure made the Viet Cong stronger, because each failure showed them exactly what the Americans would try next. So the Americans made a decision that nobody who participated in making it would ever forget for the rest of their lives. If machines cannot solve this problem, send a human being, someone small enough to fit through a 60-centimeter hole in the ground, armed with nothing but a pistol, a flashlight, and the hope that they emerge alive on the other side. There was no training manual for what came next, no doctrine, no established protocol, no precedent anywhere in the history of warfare. Just a dark hole in the ground and a soldier small enough to enter it. The army needed men with very specific physical characteristics. Small, lean, narrow across the shoulders. The tunnels were 60 to 80 centimeters wide. A standard American soldier in standard combat equipment simply could not fit. So they searched for the smallest men in the entire division. Australians, Puerto Ricans, small-framed Americans. Men who, under any other circumstance, would have been considered too slight, too small, too physically insignificant for frontline combat duty. Down here, in the dark, their size was the only qualification that mattered. They called themselves tunnel rats. Nobody assigned the name through official channels. It just fit. They stripped down before descending. No helmet, no body armor, no rifle. You cannot aim a rifle in a space that narrow. Cannot turn it around if a threat materializes behind you. What they carried was a Colt 1911 pistol with a single spare magazine, a flashlight, sometimes a knife. That was it. The full military might of the United States of America, reduced to one handgun and a battery-powered light. They developed their own rules because nobody above them understood what they faced. Rule 1: move slowly. Every centimeter of floor could be a pressure plate. Every wall could have wire at throat height. Rule 2: use the flashlight as little as possible. Light travels far in a tunnel. If you can see, you can be seen. Learn to move in total darkness. Read the walls with your fingertips. Hear breathing that is not your own. Rule 3: if you hear movement ahead, stop. Wait. Let your ears calculate distance, number, direction. Then decide. What they discovered inside was beyond any briefing. The Viet Cong had spent 20 years preparing for this. The first thing most tunnel rats encountered was not a fighter. It was a trap. Punji sticks, sharpened bamboo stakes coated in poison or feces, planted in shallow pits covered with thin dirt. You reach forward to crawl, and your hand punches through into the pit. Stakes through your palm, the infection afterward often worse than the wound. Some pits angled so stakes entered smoothly, but could not be removed without tearing flesh. Then came the animals. Bamboo vipers in clay pots, rigged to door frames. Open the door, the pot drops, the paper tears. A venomous snake lands on you in total darkness. Scorpion boxes hung from ceilings on invisible threads. Walk through the thread and the box opens above your head. Entire sections flooded with fire ants. Not lethal, but impossible to move through quietly when thousands of insects bite every exposed centimeter of skin at once. And beyond the traps, there were people. Viet Cong soldiers who knew these tunnels better than their own villages, who had lived inside them for years, who navigated total blackness at speeds that seemed impossible. Tunnel rats described hearing movement, freezing in stillness, waiting in silence, and then feeling displaced air as someone passed within arm's reach in the dark without a single sound. Firefights happened at 2 to 3 meters, sometimes less, in near-complete darkness. The psychological cost was unlike anything else in the war. Above ground, soldiers dealt with fear and exhaustion. Below ground, they confronted something primal: the fear of enclosed spaces, the fear of darkness, the fear of not knowing what is 6 inches from your face. Most tunnel rats served multiple rotations. Most came back changed. The nightmares were not about combat. They were about the silence, the walls closing in, and the sound of breathing that was not theirs. Here is the final score: 9 years, billions of dollars, the most advanced military technology ever assembled against peasants with shovels and hoes. The peasants won. By 1975, the Cu Chi system remained operational, intact. The bombs had not destroyed it. The gas had not cleared it. The water had not flooded it. The dogs had not found it. The tunnel rats had not broken it. 250 kilometers dug by hand outlasted the full might of the United States. Losses were staggering on both sides. The 25th Infantry Division suffered among the highest casualty rates in Vietnam. Thousands killed by an enemy they never saw, from a direction they never expected, disappearing into the ground before anyone could respond. Viet Cong losses were catastrophic too. Tens of thousands died in the tunnels, from bombs that went deep enough, from gas that sometimes worked, from tunnel rats who found them in the dark. But here is what the Cu Chi tunnels proved. The United States had every advantage: air power, firepower, equipment, resources. The Viet Cong had dirt, shovels, and nowhere else to go. And when you have nowhere else to go, you go underground. You dig, you survive, you wait. Because the most powerful weapon in any war is not